Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Enjoy complimentary access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection. And with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
As a scientist, I can tell you that Sundays are only 24 hours long. But with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get every game every Sunday all in one place. That's upwards of 30 hours of NFL in one day. How can there be 30 hours in 24 hours, you ask? I have a theory. Magic. New users get NFL Sunday Ticket for 8 payments of $34.50 per month. Sign up at nflsundayticket.com. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games and commercial use. Terms and embargoes apply. Availability varies.
Gatorade is the #1 proven electrolyte blend designed to hydrate better than water. So you can lose more sweat and raise your game. Gatorade, is it in you?
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. Life gets easier with great assists, and State Farm is here to dish one your way. Get in touch over the phone or on the app to get the teammate you need. State Farm with the assist. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Coverage options are selected by the customer. Availability and eligibility vary by state.
We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane Page. I am your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. And I'm joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Had you mentioned the 100th episode? I wasn't sure you were going to mention it at the start. I didn't know if you had it in the title. I can't see what your title is, Shane. But yeah, 100 episodes of doing this. It sounds quite cool to do it with BLG, seeing as we begun back on BGM Radio a couple of years ago. RIP BGM Radio. But yeah, it's cool that we carried on doing this. We turned it into a little something, and hopefully we'll keep going. And hopefully the Eagles are going to give us a good season with lots to talk about. Which, knowing this Eagles team, I think they will. So yeah, it feels good. 100 episodes, BLG here. It feels like the perfect match in many ways.
Yeah. Marshawn saying that Grammarly wrote my opening spiel. I wrote that on a napkin 3 years ago because I told Jonny, I was like, I feel like we need an opener. And he's like, we'll just figure it out. And then I did that the first episode. And I think the first words Jonny ever said on a podcast were something along the lines of, wow, that sounds so professional. So go back. You can listen to episode 1 if you can find it on BGN Radio somewhere. But as Jonny mentioned, this is our 100th episode, and we are joined by esteemed guest. He is the president, the godfather, the CEO of BleedingGreenNation.com. He's also responsible for Jonny and I podcasting together. It is Brandon Lee Gowton. Give him a follow on Twitter at Brandon Gowton. Brandon, how are you doing, man?
Always nice to be here with you guys. As I say to you on and off the air, listen every week. It's the not fun thing about going on a podcast you already listened to, then like I'm not going to listen to the episode now, so then I feel like I miss it for a week. But it is very nice to actually just be here in person with you guys talking about the Eagles instead.
I honestly never thought about that. It's like, oh, I was on that episode, I'm just going to skip that one. I've never thought about that, but I don't get a lot of requests for guesting on podcasts. So BLG here, he's He's the pro's pro. He gets lots of requests. So, but yeah, always excited to do this. And we are going to do our Eagles season predictions today. We did this show last year, and we're going to keep the same format this year. We are each going to give you an MVP, a breakout player of the year, and a disappointing player on both sides of the ball. We'll make a record prediction, and then we'll end with a bold prediction. And we actually went back last year and revisited these, and we don't need to do that again today and give Jonny a big head again. We're not going to do that, but we will probably try to come back to this offseason and poke some fun at ourselves. Mostly, hopefully, poke some fun at Jonny and talk about how great BLG and I did. So, but before we dive into that, Jonny and I haven't potted together since the Micah Parsons trade happened. And I would be remiss if I didn't give BLG the opportunity to also poke some fun at the Cowboys. So, BLG, I'll ask you first. What was your initial reaction to the Parsons trade?
Yeah, so I actually did a NFC East mixtape episode that you can find on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel with RJ Ochoa, who is trying to cope by being like, I've already slammed the Cowboys for this move, so nothing you say can hurt me. But obviously, we all know deep down that's not true. So, I mean, it's such an embarrassing trade. The fact that they have a future Hall of Fame kind of talent, 3-time All-Pro, like this superstar, best player on their team. However you want to qualify it, he's the best player on that Dallas Cowboys roster until they traded him for, like, relative to what he is, kind of nothing, like 2 first-round picks that are probably going to be in the 20s, and Kenny Clark, who is a 30-year-old defensive tackle coming off of a down season. So that's just insane to me, and especially like a week before playing the Philadelphia Eagles, and to a team that is famous for like ending the Cowboys season multiple times in high-profile fashion. So it's really just delicious, the fact that the Cowboys, in part with help from the Eagles, they get Micah Parsons because of how they originally acquired him. You know, the Eagles traded up to get Devontae Smith with the Cowboys, and the Cowboys trade down and they get Micah Parsons. They kind of did the hard part right, actually finding a player of that caliber, and then they screwed up what should be the easy part, which is then just signing that player and giving the player a bunch of money. That's typically not the challenging part, but they screwed it up, and it's great news for the Philadelphia Eagles.
What's kind of crazy about that whole sequence of events, too, is do you remember the reason the Cowboys traded down with the Eagles?
No.
They were in full panic mode because Patrick Surtain came off the board right ahead of them.
Yes.
And so had that not happened, they would have stuck and picked Patrick Surtain, which also would have been a slam dunk pick.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Giants would have ended up with Devontae Smith, and I don't know what the Eagles would have done, but interesting to look back and it's like, man, if the Broncos hadn't taken Surtain, the Cowboys would have got their guy, and it also would have been a slam dunk. So a really talented run of the draft there in 2021. But yeah, I agree. Jonny, what were your thoughts on the Parsons trade?
Yeah, so I guess it's an Eagles pod, so we don't go too heavy on love for Cowboys players. I think, and I don't watch every team like I watch the Eagles, and I always say that, so I don't have a framework, shall I say. I always think Myles Garrett's the best defensive player in the league, probably. If I could build around anyone, I'd build around Micah Parsons. And the funny thing is, quite often against the Eagles, I don't even think he plays that well, because the Eagles quite often have schemed around him well, and Lane Johnson's done well against him, and I still think he moves like no other defensive player in the league. I think he's outrageously talented and just freakishly good. I mean, he's missed 4 games in 4 years, and Jerry Jones is talking about his injury history like he's played nearly every snap except last year. Go back to his rookie year, the lowest amount of sacks he's ever had was last year, which was 12. Like, we're talking 52.5 sacks in 4 years. Like, I don't think BLG's not joking. He's a Hall of Fame player. I think he's unbelievably good. And my philosophy in football is if you have those kind of players, they never leave. Like, you'd be talking almost such a ridiculous deal, but nobody would give up that much. Like, I'd be after like 5 first-round picks, like something ludicrous that you would just never, ever get, basically saying, we're just not trading you. You are going to stay here until you retire. And how many players of that good on the defensive side of the ball do you see leaving their prime? You don't see it. To me, it's utter madness. Like, I think it's complete madness. If Kenny Clark's even a really good player still, his age, you're sort of sending a signal that you're rebuilding, I guess, because you're losing Parsons and you're obviously worse. And then you're trading for a 29-year-old. And I also think the ironic thing is when you trade someone as good as Parsons, you make the team he's going to a lot better. And I'd be kidding if I was happy that Parsons is out the Cowboys because we play him every year twice. But I think it makes the Packers significantly better. And I think the Packers now become a real like Super Bowl contender if they were not already. And that means the first round picks you get might be terrible as well. Like if you end up with like Kenny Clark and like 28 and 24, let's say, that's such a horrendous pickup for someone that good. Like it sounds almost ridiculous, but I don't know if I wouldn't want to do it for like 3 first round picks. I don't know if I want to do it for like 4. Like obviously the value wise, there comes a point when every player has a value, but I just don't want to ever lose players that talented. Like to me, it'd be like if you offered me that for Jalen Carter now, it'd be absolutely no chance. And you can talk about cap, but teams always figure out a way to do cap. You've got overpaid players in other positions. You prioritize I always think the NFL is a proper superstar league. Like you prioritize superstars over anything else. You don't want a full-on stars and scrubs roster. And the Eagles have been very lucky in recent years. They haven't had that. But you can go quite far with stars and scrubs. Like as long as you're decent in the trenches, if you've got a couple of just outrageously good players on the outside, you can be really, really good. I know Ben Solak, of course you all know Ben Solak here. He tweeted just a very standard chart, just pressure rate on first and second down. Parsons is first with 15.3. Second is Hendrickson on 11.8. Like 4% difference. You'd have to go off the screen basically to get to the Hendrickson and go down 4%. So Hendrickson at 11%. To get to 7%, you're talking like the 20th rusher. Like Hassan Reddick is down there. Like Donnell Hunter's down there. Like you're the difference between second and like Josh Sweat's basically 4% lower than Hendrickson. The difference between Parsons and everyone else. And by the way, those rates don't include the fact he's probably doubled half the time. Like I think he can. The modern NFL as well. Off-ball linebacker, edge, play him wherever the hell you want. I've never raved about him that much because he's been a Cowboys player, and it's not very popular amongst Eagles fans to spend 5 minutes on a pod raving about him, but he's probably my favourite defensive player to watch as well, and I'm not just saying that because he's gone. I can't believe they actually traded him. And I should believe it because it's Jerry Jones, but when I actually heard the rumours, I thought there's no chance. We've heard these rumours before. The players don't get traded that are that good. If they got off-the-field concerns and stuff, it happens, but I don't even think he wanted to go either. I think he was happy to stay. Yeah, their 2 first-round picks could be like really good late first-round picks, and it's still a bad deal. And anyone talking about his cap hit now is also wrong because he wouldn't have got the money he's on with the Packers now if they had sorted the contract out earlier on and paid him fairly. He wouldn't have got as big of a deal. Players always get a bigger deal on the free agent market or when they move. That's basically always the way. So yeah, I think it's fantastic news for the Eagles. I think unless you consider the Packers a bigger threat now. So in some ways it might not be good, but I think long-term, not playing him twice a year for the next 5 years, especially when Lane Johnson goes, because when Lane goes, that's going to be, you're really going to see Parsons decide some NFC East games when Lane Johnson's gone. So I am thrilled. I can't believe they did it, but they did. So it must be, I got a friend of mine who's a Cowboys fan that I actually got into the NFL over here. And he just texted me, and he, classic friend, supported the Cowboys purely because they were the Eagles' biggest rivals, like all friends do. He was like, yeah, I'll get into it and I'll just support the Cowboys. And he texted me the day it happened, like, what did I do? And I was like, yeah, sorry, your fault for choosing the rival, because it's just, and he's got a Parsons jersey, of course. So get the whole fan action of like the fact that fans all love him. It's really, really poor on their part. But for our part, great.
Yeah, a couple of comments here. Krabby says that Jonny and BLG's audio is a little low. I will be able to correct that for the podcast feeds. Just a PSA, if you're ever watching one of the live shows and the audio is a little off, I can't balance that live, but it'll be better on the podcast, so you can check the podcast feed.
Shane, just really quickly before we move on, shout out my good friend Mark, who just texted me saying, I'm watching the show and this is making me incredibly depressed. And that is the Cowboys fan I just referenced. So
well, tell him to buckle up, because I want to talk about it too.
My phone just vibrated and he said, this is making me depressed. So sorry about that.
Yeah. Anthony said, getting a double dose of Shane today. Love it. You might not love this part because I did mention it briefly on Chalk Talk earlier today too, but there's so many points that this goes wrong for the Cowboys. Like, how do you trade a Hall of Fame player, period, at 26 years old? Much less for as little as they did. And so, I mean, okay, he's 4 seasons in. Are we going to say he's a Hall of Fame player? Well, yeah, pretty much the only thing at this point that derails that is injury, and he has no extensive injury history. So he's going to be a Hall of Famer unless something crazy happens that's totally unpredictable. You don't trade that guy at 26 years old. You sign him, and you sign him a year ago when he first becomes eligible. So that's where the Cowboys first go wrong. The second place they go wrong is, okay, you don't do that. pay him the money now. Anything he wants. Give him a blank check. It doesn't matter. But third, if you're not going to do that, at least create the less egregious mistake and trade him in March when every team is in play because they haven't spent free agency money and you can get draft picks this year. Like, we were talking about it on Chalk Talk. Like, the Packers have to be favorites to get to the NFC Championship game. And so if that happens, like, you're looking at a 29th overall pick at best. And it's just not good enough for a guy like that. And so I saw another comment that somebody was asking, so are the Eagles the winners in the Parsons trade? Actually, I don't think so there either. Like, it's fun to laugh at the Cowboys for being incompetent, but he went to the worst possible place for the Eagles. Like, you would have rather him ended up in the AFC or with an NFC non-contender, but the Packers are so young and they've got a great coach. They're going to be around for a long time. So I actually hate where he landed. And honestly, I kind of wish the Packers had to give up a little more to get him. But such a bad decision. Jonny mentioned, like, the player, you pay the player, and the player has all the leverage after the trade, right? Green Bay can't trade 2 first-round picks for him and not immediately sign him, and so that price tag goes up. When he was in Dallas, Dallas had all the leverage. Like, they could have made him play out this year. They could have franchise tagged him 2 years after that. And yeah, it's really bad PR, but Jerry loves that stuff. And so they had all the leverage. They would not have had to pay him $47 million. But even if they did, they should have done it. And that it was a huge mistake on their part. And there's really no getting around that. So sorry, Jonny's friend. You should just have been an Eagles fan. Come join us. Come join us. There's plenty of room. So
yeah,
all
too
right.
late now. The damage is done. Too late now. The jerseys are in the wardrobe. Can never go back, Shane, on your team. It's the rule of sports. You got to suck it up and deal with it for God knows how long now.
So, all right. Well, let's jump in now and let's do what we actually convened to talk about. Thanks, Jerry, for giving us an extra topic. But we're going to dive in and do our offensive MVPs first. BLG, you're our esteemed guest, so I'll let you go first on this one. Who do you have down as your offensive MVP for this year?
I'm going to go with the player who was voted by his peers as the number 1 player in the NFL, the player who I was fading way too much last year. Is this a classic overcorrection? Perhaps, but that's not why I'm doing it in my mind. I'm doing it because I saw this guy in training camp not only look like ready for the season, I thought Saquon Barkley looked better than he did last year in training camp. And obviously, what is the ceiling for him to get better when you literally break the NFL all-time record or single season record in terms of including the playoffs for rushing yards and just being, so amazing, having all these long runs that he probably can't have just by virtue of it's so insane to count on that production again. But man, I just think Saquon Barkley is such a difference maker for this team. And we saw it last year. And teams are certainly going to try their best at adjusting to stopping him. And the Kansas City Chiefs had some success, not even a ton, by the way. Like, Saquon still had over 100 yards from scrimmage in the Super Bowl. And obviously he wasn't what he was for the rest of the season, but still, and obviously beyond him, the rest of the Eagles offense was pretty on fire because the Chiefs were so locked in on Saquon in part. So I'm just not going to be in the guy doubting Saquon Barkley this year. That's not going to be my position. Offensive line's still awesome. I think there were times in training camp where passing game kind of reminded me a little bit of last year where it just wasn't fully clicking the way you would hope it would. Maybe that gets ironed out. But the point why I bring that up is because in those times, it was press the easy button. Just go back to Saquon. And then all of a sudden, the offense looks a whole lot better. So I think that's possible. That could happen again this year. And I am just going to lean into Saquon Barkley and take him.
All right. So Saquon Barkley from BLG. Jonny, who do you have down for your offensive MVP?
Yeah, so I'm going to do this like last year. And seeing as we'll probably bring up our predictions as well, I'm not going to go against the grain for the sake of the show to pick someone else to have a discussion. So I'm more than happy to have a discussion about other players and who it could be, but I'm also going to go with Saquon Barkley. Picked him last year. Did I pick him last year as MVP or did I pick him as offensive player? One of the two. Yeah, I was all on. No, I did pick Barkley. I did pick Barkley. Of course, I got.
I think you picked him as MVP.
Yeah, I did. I just checked. Of course, I've got my predictions up last year just to have a look. I don't really need to add anything to what BLG said. I think the Eagles are going to have more of a stable run-pass ratio this year. It might not be 2K, like, oh, wow, it might be like 1,750, like the end of the world. I think he's going to kill it. I think the offensive line's going to be really good. I think they're going to run the ball a lot, and I think he's a phenomenal athlete and a phenomenal player.
Johnny will come back and join us.
I think
hopefully.
It's not
we don't need to hear
Hurts
him
or Brown
talk
or
about
Smith.
how good he did
It's
last
just
year.
I think the offense ideally
while he is
is
gone,
going to run through Saquon Barkley still.
BLG,
so I will go with Barkley.
Any mean things you want to say about Johnny that he'll never hear?
Oh, that's true. He probably won't listen back, right? No,
Probably
Johnny's
not.
awesome, doing a great job for us at BGN. But again, I just think Saquon. I don't want to be the victim of your, leaning in too hard to what you saw. Kind of like I feel like I don't play fantasy football anymore because I feel like it's just not the time commitment. It just isn't right for me. But like, I don't want to be the guy in the fantasy football league who's kind of like putting too much weight on what happened last year. And we obviously saw the touches that Saquon had, and we know the effect that can have the next year. Look at Christian McCaffrey. I'm not saying it's doomed to be the same situation, but Johnny is back.
All right,
That
Johnny
went
is
well.
back.
I feel like it feels like Riverside hates me this year, Shane. The good news is if I drop more than once, then Shane hates me even more because he can't edit it. So,
it's literally the worst.
and it's also great on a podcast.
This podcast will be a nightmare now that you dropped.
It's going to be great now if I go a second time. It's also great that I realised I was talking to nobody for about 30 seconds. So I won't repeat all my points that I made so I don't go mentally insane. But long story short, are you still talking about offensive? You still on MVP?
Yeah.
I do think the run-pass ratio will be more split this year, but I still think they're going to run the ball a hell of a lot. And I think Saquon Barkley is their best player and apparently the best player in the NFL. So I'm not going to complicate things now. I'm going to say that Saquon will be the leader of the offense and therefore he'll be MVP.
All right. I went with Jalen Hurts this year. I've spoken a little bit about how I think teams are really going to follow that Chiefs Super Bowl game plan as poorly as it went for them and try to stack the box and make Jalen Hurts beat him through the air. And I think he's fully capable of doing that. I think he is going to do that. But I think teams are going to look at what Saquon did last year and just say he's not going to do that to us. And so I think Hurts is going to have to throw the ball more this year. And I think he's proven that he can do that. And he does really well when he's given that opportunity. So I went Jalen Hurts for offensive MVP. So let's flip it over and go defensive MVP. And Johnny, I'll throw it to you first this time. Who do you have down for defensive MVP?
Yeah, this is a tricky one because I think there's two, I guess, maybe three players you could mention, maybe three, maybe even four, I guess, maybe. So
maybe even five.
Maybe even five. No, I think four. I think last year we were correct on the Zach Bourne being the more important player, but Jalen Carter being the better player. Because of the linebacker position and the stability, I'm going to go with Jalen Carter this year. Because I think although Zach Bourne is unique in what he does, you've added someone that had in Jahar Campbell who's at least got a similar skill set. And I think you've also got players that if you had to play, you wouldn't lose a lot. Whereas I think if Carter goes, I think you're in big trouble. And I think Carter might take that next step to just like freakishly, as we said with Ollie Connolly, Shane on that show, God tier level. And I think therefore, just like Barkley, I'm not going to overcomplicate it. And I think he's the best defensive player on the Eagles. And therefore, I think he's the MVP on the defensive side of the ball as well.
So I agree it's Carter or Bond, but I thought about it a little differently. Just in terms of statistical production, I think it's going to be Zach Bond. Because until Jalen Carter puts up high sack totals, he's going to be underrated in terms of the impact that he provides. And I'm not sure the Eagles have the defensive line around him to get him a lot of those single block opportunities to go really rush the passer. Not to mention, he cannot buy a holding call to save his life with NFL officials. So I don't know what the deal is there, but I think he is going to be a force multiplier. But it wouldn't surprise me if he's still at like 7 sacks for the season, while Zach Bond is up near the top of the league in terms of tackles again. And so both going to be really impactful players. To be clear, Carter is the better player, but I think Bond will have the more statistically significant year. So I went Zach Bond for MVP. What about you, BLG?
I like those picks a lot. I think what's funny about Jalen Carter is watching him in training camp this year. I don't think he like coasts in training camp, to be clear, in terms of like he's lazy. I'm not accusing him of that. But at the same time, I don't think he goes like all out which it's fine. And he probably shouldn't, because I don't know if the Eagles would be able to practice if he did. Because there are times where you could tell where he was like super engaged and he wanted to take over. And when that happens, it's like, good luck. Everyone else, like, you can't do anything about that. He has decided to take over and you can't really get around that. So I do think it would be nice to kind of see more of that this year. Again, not saying it's like he chooses not to. It's not that simple, but would like to see him hit just that extra gear where you're seeing that more often. Like the Saints game kind of really stuck out in that regard last year. Like he totally just, the Saints couldn't do anything on offense. And it felt like it was because Jalen Carter was like, I don't want you guys to do anything on offense. Bond missed a lot of training camp, but then like the first day he comes back, he's breaking up passes instantly. I mean, he's such a good player. And the fact that he's entering year 2, he wasn't even having a ton of experience at this time last year. But for the sake of changing it up, it's not really fun if I just, pick the same answer again. I'll go Quinyon Mitchell, because Quinyon looks like he's ready to make a jump from year 1, where he was already great, to year 2, where just watching him in training camp, he's going up against A.J. Brown a lot. And there's times where he's going up against Devontae Smith too. And he just erases those guys. He's like, they're just not an option for Jalen Hurts when he's on them and he's at his peak performance. So we'll see what happens when it comes to the second cornerback spot. I'm sure we'll adjust that at some point, or that's going to be a big talking point this season. But as far as Quinyon, I just think, and that's really going to help him. And in theory, if teams are just going to be able to pick on that cornerback, it makes Quinyon's job easier. They're not even going to test him. And I just think he's going to be a total lockdown cornerback this season.
All right. So Quinyon Mitchell, pro podcasting move there from BLG to be like, it's Jalen Carter, but I'll give a different answer just to be different. And he kind of gets coverage in 2 areas there. So that's a total pro move from BLG. Let's roll on to Offensive Breakout Player of the Year. And I'll take this one first. We'll just keep it in the rotation so Jonny doesn't cry foul later.
Brilliant.
This one's tough, though, because who can you say will break out on a great offense that returned 10 of 11 starters? So the only logical answer is Ben Van Sumeren, right? Fullback, under center. I'm not going to go that far off the reservation.
I feel like there's one answer for this one, unless you're going to go really... Well, no, maybe there's more than one, but I think there's an obvious one, isn't there?
I went with Devontae Smith.
Okay, that's not the obvious one. So fair enough.
So he only had 833 yards last year, and he missed some games with injury. But even if you look back at the 2 years before, he was at or right around 1,000 yards, and I just think he's a better player than that. I think he's going to have to be much more productive this year, given how I think teams are going to play the Eagles. And I think he's up for that. I think Jonny and I have talked about before, the 1A, 1B thing with him and A.J. Brown is ridiculous. He's clearly the number 2 receiver. But I say that as a guy who thinks A.J. Brown's the best receiver in the league. I think Devontae Smith is a top 15 receiver in the league, top 16-ish, somewhere in there. And I think he will be a lot more productive this year than he has been any of his previous 3 years. So I'm taking him for the breakout player of the year. Give me something around like 1,200 yards.
That's what I was going to ask.
9 touchdowns, something like that. That's what I'm looking at for Devontae Smith, which I'm in a fantasy football league for the first time in like 10 years, and he's on my team. And my team is named Devontae's Inferno, so I really need him to come through for me.
I was
so
going to
Devontae
ask
Smith.
you, to put a number on it, because how do you define a breakout for Devontae Smith? So I'd accept 1,200. I think we'll give you that if you hit 1,200.
All right. So BLG, that puts you up next. Who do you have for offensive breakout player?
I really want to pick Darius Cooper because I love Darius Cooper. I invented Darius Cooper, some would say. I saw him early in training camp, and I just was like, this guy's great. He's really, really good. Sure enough, he makes the team. Unfortunately, he is probably going to be wide receiver 5, wide receiver 4 at best to start this season. I don't even know if he'll be active on game day right away, but that's definitely a name to file away. I think Darius Cooper is going to be good. In terms of the players who actually play, I think Dallas Goedert had like a really good training camp, especially early on, maybe faded a little bit. Not that he played terribly, but just like early in training camp, he was dominating. And they missed AJ and Devontae at parts in training camp. What Dallas Goedert is, it's not like he's breaking out in terms of we haven't seen him play well before. But this is a contract year for him. It's a very big season for him. And also, the Eagles don't have any contract or tight end signed beyond this year. So it would kind of be nice if Dallas Goedert either plays really well and stays healthy, obviously the big factor, and you keep him, or he goes elsewhere. Maybe get a comp pick for him, depending on how that plays out. Eagles can try to find another solution there. But yeah, I think Dallas Goedert kind of gets forgotten about from a standpoint of you have AJ, you have Saquon, you have Devontae. The fact that he's been hurt, but he was so good in the playoffs last year. He was awesome. Like, his numbers in the playoffs were great. And I think that could carry over into this season where he knows he needs to go out there and have a big year to probably get what would likely his final like big payday in the NFL. So I'm going to say Goddard, assuming he can stay healthy, which is a big if, goes out this year. I think some of those injuries have been bad luck. I don't think it's just like, he's a soft tissue kind of guy. There's been some bad luck, like the arm thing there at one point. I think he's even talked about. But yeah, I'm going to take Dallas Goedert.
All right. Also on my fantasy team, those were my two Eagles, so I support that pick as well. I've been big on the Dallas Goedert is a top 5 tight end. He just doesn't get the volume and can't stay healthy. So if he can stay healthy, it would be huge for this offense. Jonny, let's throw it over to you. You said there was an obvious pick. Who's your guy?
It's nice going free and getting the layup. I think it's Tyler Steen. I think he's the obvious one, and stick to the truth, I'll go with the obvious one again. Mainly because there's not much. This isn't like the biggest, what would you say, like, I'm convinced he's going to be great, but I picked Micah Parsons last year for similar reasons, that there wasn't that many players that I was going to go for. And I feel like, from what I read from Lane Johnson, he seems to love him. He's now had, 3 years in Stout University? 3 years, am I right? Is he coming out of his third year?
Yeah.
I didn't think he played that well last year, to be honest with you, but he seemed to win the job very easily. The Eagles didn't really seem to consider any alternatives seriously. So I think it's hard not to look good playing for the Eagles starting offensive line next to Lane Johnson, Cam Jurgens, with Saquon Barkley running behind you. It's very hard to call a guard a breakout player. Whether Becton did last year, who the hell knows? But he got a decent-sized starting contract, so you could say maybe he did.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was probably fair to say, but it's hard to judge a guard, isn't it? I think Becton was easier because Becton just has these wild blocks every week. Like, one or two of you are like, oh my God, this guy's massive. Whereas I think Steve might be a bit more subtle in the way he does things, so he might be harder to pick out. But maybe if he's one of those players will get to week 7 and we'll be like, oh, do you know what? I already mentioned Steen's name very much in a good way. So I'll be honest, I struggled for breakout because my heart wanted to go with someone else like a Mechie, but the targets aren't there. If there was a tight end 2 that I really liked, I would be pounding the table on that, but there isn't. So I'm going to go with Tyler Steen.
All right, let's kick it over to the defensive side of the ball. And BLG, you're up first here. Call your shot. Who is the defensive breakout player of the year?
I got to go with my guy, Nolan Smith. I mean, he already kind of broke out last year, but whatever. I'm going to take him again anyway, because first of all, the Eagles pass rush needs him. And I think it's possible he can build on what we saw from last year, whereas he got better over the course of the season. And funny to think that this time last season, we're all talking about Nolan Smith plays in the last preseason game, like deep into the game relatively for a player you figure, would be important last year. And it's like, man, is this guy maybe a bust? In fact, Jonny probably used those words. No, I know. Jonny was not always the biggest fan of Nolan Smith.
I was not.
I think I like him a lot. He's an ascending talent still. I think he can get even better than he's been to this point. So I'm going to go with Nolan Smith. Again, the Eagles edge rush needs him because they are thin there at the... No, what am I doing? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I totally forgot who it was. Matthew in the comment reminded me who I'm taking here. Sorry, that was an answer where I totally forgot my real answer and I just started talking. Look, I'm high on Nolan Smith too, but Moro Ojomo is the correct answer here. I totally just
even when
that.
BLG goes first, he gets this would be a great answer, but I'm going to go with this other one. It's great.
I love Nolan Smith, but he already broke out. Sorry. Totally just forgot I picked Moro Ojomo and totally just blanked on that. Yeah, it's Moro Ojomo. I mean, he was awesome in training camp. I think it's a little bit much to say. I think it's not just one person. This has been a very common refrain that like, oh, he'll be even better than Milton Williams. And I think that's like a bit much to put on a player who has one career stack, including the playoffs. Like just to say that he's definitely going to outpace Milton Williams, and Milton Williams is a really good player. But I do think Moro Ojomo will have something like approximating some of that production we've seen from Milton Williams. Be a huge win, and he looks so ready to play. And thank you, Matthew, and the comments for saving me here.
All right, so Nolan Smith, nay, Moro Ojomo for BLG.
Yes.
Jonny, who's your defensive breakout player of the year?
Yeah, this is one where I guess I'll go different. I'll do a classic podcast move and say I think a Jomo is the correct answer. But I'll also say that Breakout's an interesting one because I think he played extremely well last year. And I'll use now just to remind everyone that I love the Jomo coming out post-draft. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I remember, I'll never forget that BLG article, BLG, when I wrote it, and at that conclusion, I was like, how the hell did he go when he went? Yeah. So it's always good to mention it where I can. So I'll pick on someone, actually, that I didn't think I would be here at this time last year saying, and I'll pick Jalix Hunt. I think that he's going to get a great chance to play a lot of snaps this year. I think he should be the Eagles' second edge defender. I did not expect him to develop this quickly, but I think I'm in danger here of, what's the word? Small sample size. I'm in danger here of, there's a word for it that I'm looking for, but I'm not smart enough to remember it. But to basically I'm in danger of looking at a small sample size and projecting that over an entire season. I don't think he was as good, and I think people forget that the first half of the season was very non-existent. Like, we're talking like 5 snaps a game for a third-round pick. But by the end of it, I think he has some unique traits in the way he moves. I think he's just a really weird athlete, and I sort of felt like it was either going to go boom or bust with him, and there was no in-between. And based on what I've said before about that, I think it looks like it might go boom, because I don't think he's going to bust. I think he was better against the run than I thought. I think he showed he could rush a passer, and there's quite a good few answers, I think, on defense here. Jomo is obviously, as I said, a great shout, but I think Jalix Hunt could easily be the breakout player this year. So I will go with someone I did not think I would say this time last year, but I will go with Jalix Hunt.
Football is back, and every touchdown brings you closer to a payout with DraftKings Sportbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Your season starts now. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code PINPULL. That's code PINPULL to get $300 in bonus bets instantly when you place your first bet of $5 or more, plus over $200 off of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. That is 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resorts, Kansas, fees may apply in Illinois. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bet expires 7 days after issuance. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. NFL Sunday Ticket offer for new subscribers only and auto renews until canceled. Digital game and commercial users excluded. Restrictions may apply. Additional NFL Sunday Ticket terms at youtube.com/go/NFL Sunday Ticket/terms. Limited time offer.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power, serious acceleration, and advanced Audi tech. It's not just a new EV, it's a new way to experience driving. The fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. The next chapter of Audi is here.
All right. Well, I am going to go with Nolan Smith. He only had 6.5 sacks last season. This is a guy that I loved going back to the draft. I actually had him as who the Eagles were going to take at 10 overall, and I would have been fine with that. And so when they were able to get him at the end of the first round, I was elated. And then, it's not just a draft priors thing, because after his rookie year, I was just like, man. And then I sat on a podcast with Jonny last year doing a preseason film review after we watched him play deep into the third preseason game. And I was like, man, he not only played that long in the entire preseason, like the literal one thing I've said the whole time is just develop a counter move. And you didn't even see him throw it in a preseason game ever. And I was just like, maybe it's just not going to be a thing. And he started slow. But he really turned it on down the stretch. Over the final 3 games of the regular season and the playoffs, he generated 62% of his season total in pressures. And so, will he stay that hot? Probably not, because that would be unbelievable. But I think he really started. I think we saw the tip of the iceberg of the breakout in the playoffs. And, maybe that's a cheat answer, but we've seen guys look good in a small sample size before and it not really carry forward. So I think this is going to be a really good year for Nolan Smith. I think he probably still not a double-digit sack guy, but I think he's going to have a really good year. He's going to impact the pass game in a way that he hasn't before the playoffs, and he's going to continue to just be dominant in the run game. So Nolan Smith is my answer. Let's flip it over to the biggest disappointment on the offense, which is also really difficult, just given the dynamics of the offense. But Jonny, who do you have down for your disappointing player?
I feel like the comments will predict mine before I say it. I'm going to take Will Shipley for the simple reason that A, I'm not sure he's that good, and B, I think Saquon Barkley's going to carry the ball a hell of a lot of times. So I think depends what people expect from Shipley, I guess. Even I think Kenny Gainwell was decent last year, and then when I was looking at numbers the other day, I was like, he did only have 290 rushing yards and 16 receptions. And I think if that's it's not exactly setting the world on fire. So I think if Shipley does slightly worse, because I think last year the Eagles didn't have a third running back they really trusted, Will Shipley just wasn't really used much at all except for down the stretch. Whereas I think A.J. Dillon will play this year and will have some rushing attempts. So there's an argument there'll be even less for Shipley there as well. Wouldn't shock me at all if A.J. Dillon becomes running back too. And I think the coaching staff wants to get Shipley involved. He's a guy they drafted, and I think he's got a lot of use in a specific situation. But I just can't see him getting a lot of snaps and a lot of playing time. So I am going to go with Will Shipley, which when Will Shipley eventually does break out, I'm going to look like an idiot because I've doubled down on this take quite a lot. But it's just, when I look at it, Shane, as you said, there's not that many to go for. So I think, in my opinion, he's the obvious choice.
I feel like it should be pointed out that Jonny just picked a backup.
I mean, that's
his biggest
perfectly fine, isn't it? It's not likely to break out. It's biggest disappointment. I think based on what the average fan expects, I think he would do worse than that. Sorry, AJ Brown, because he's not very good. You happy now, Shane? You can tweet that one out.
Yes, I will definitely pull that clip.
I think
AJ Brown's not very good.
I think it speaks to how hard it is to pick one of the starters. That the backup running back is a pretty primary answer there. I do think, if Shipley can't be what at least Kenny Gainwell was last year, it's that's a disaster, I would say. That's a pretty low bar, I think, for him to clear. Not the biggest Kenny Gainwell fan, but even still. For my answer, am I up? Sorry.
I'm up. And
okay, you're up. Sorry.
So I went back and forth on this one, and I'm still going back and forth. So
it's hard.
The first guy that I wrote down is Saquon. And not because I think he'll be bad. I just think people are going to expect regular season Saquon, and they might get Super Bowl Saquon, who wasn't bad, but he was bottled up pretty well in that game. And I think he's going to be the focal point of what opposing teams, what they're going to try to take away. And certainly there could be some regression just in terms of yards per carry. The offensive line's run blocking is probably going to be worse, swapping out Becton for Steen. Maybe health things, He could have a really good year, but miss 4 games, and all of a sudden his really good year was 1,400 yards, and that'd be fantastic, but people would be disappointed by that. But that feels like trying to play the question a little bit too much. and call like a 1,400 yard season disappointing. So I'm going to go with Tyler Steen. I was a Tyler Steen guy. I thought he would win the job over Becton last summer, and I was way off base on that. And maybe I'm way off base now, but when I saw him last year, I did not think he looked very good. I fully understood why he did not win that job. And so, the things that Lane Johnson have said about him give me a little bit of pause, but I think if you're looking for a guy, I think people are going to expect Mekhi Becton. And I don't think Tyler Steen's going to make those splash plays. I also just think he will maybe not. I think he might be the pass blocker that Becton was, which isn't top of the line, while lacking those splash plays in the run game. So give me Tyler Steen.
I'm going to go with, although real quick on Steen, I saw Bo Wolf had noted that some people like in the Eagles feel like Steen had an even better offseason than Becton did last year. So there does seem to be internal optimism there. In addition to Jeff Stoutland being pretty effusive when talking about Tyler Steen. Same thing. Jalen Carter was really effusive about praising Tyler Steen. Lane Johnson as well. You always take it with a grain of salt when it's your teammates and coaches.
Just tell Shane he's wrong, basically, before the season started.
No, I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying
that's why we love BLG.
Look, I'm definitely pro Tyler Steen. I'm going to go as my biggest disappointment, Landon Dickerson. And not from a standpoint of, we know he's a really good player, but it's not fun to talk about the injury stuff. But the fact that he did have this knee injury, missed a lot of time in training camp, looked like he was ready, and then all of a sudden he misses practice on Monday leading up to week 1 here. He's apparently back on Tuesday, but is now dealing with a back issue. Like, that's kind of scary. Does anytime you see like a back injury come up? So maybe it's nothing and he ends up being fine. But we've kind of seen Dickerson have, which was the book on him coming into the NFL, like having this injury history. But we've seen him even dating back to last year, like having these kind of nagging issues. And he's tough. He's incredibly tough. He's able to play through it. I don't doubt that. But I just wonder if, and also maybe if that knee injury maybe contributed to the back injury, because sometimes you're, overcompensating. So I wonder if it could just kind of be a down year for him from a standpoint of he's just not totally healthy.
All right, let's move on to the defensive side of the ball and go biggest disappointment on defense. And this is another one I've really gone back and forth between two guys, both on the defensive line. So I'm going to pull the BLG and give them both, and then maybe I'll pick one. So the first guy I wrote down is Milton Williams, Moro Ojomo. Because I think people are going to expect him to be Milton Williams. I mean, Milton Williams was 6th in the NFL in pass rush win rate at defensive tackle. And I think those are unfair expectations for Moro Ojomo. But I think it's what people expect. I think they expect him to just break out and have a wild year like Milton Williams did. And I think he's going to have a good year. I just don't know that he'll live up to that. But the guy I'm actually going to go with, I think, as I talked that one through, I like this one better. I'm going to go with Jordan Davis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and to be clear, I think Jordan Davis plays a really valuable role in the Eagles' defense as a run stopper. He allows them to do a lot of the things structurally that they do that makes their pass defense so good. But he was a first-round pick, and he played an average of 14 snaps per game in the playoffs last year. And so I know he's lost weight, and there's been talk of him being an every-down player, but I honestly think he's still just going to be snap limited. And because he's not going to be a very good pass rusher, a 5% pressure rate last year when he got a chance to rush the passer. And I also think that the weight that he dropped is going to make him lose some of that effectiveness as a run stopper. And so I think at the end of the year, when we're talking about guys that were disappointing in the defense, I think he'll be a name that's near the top of the list. So BLG, what do you think? Who do you have down as your disappointing player?
Yeah, I think Jordan Davis is, again, the right answer in this situation because the Eagles give him this 5th-year option, and I've always been pretty positive about Jordan Davis. I wanted the team to draft him, and I agree with this point, by the way. It's on the screen here from J. Rock, that 1974, that says, "Can you be disappointed in Adoree Jackson when you don't expect much of anything?" Yeah, so I can't. I'm not going to pick him. I'm not going to pick Keely Ringo, who's already been demoted. He already kind of is the answer to the question in terms of It should have been Keely starting this year. He will not be. He's not even in contention to start currently. Doesn't mean he won't get a chance at some point down the road, depending how the season goes. But for now, I can't pick him because I don't even think he's going to play as it currently is projected, other than on special teams where he can obviously be a good gunner. We've seen that before. So, but to not double up on Jordan Davis, who I just don't think we're going to really see that sack production. That it's not like you need him to be a double-digit guy. I do need more than like 1 or 1.5. Like it's not everything, but it's something. I'm going to go with Sidney Brown because currently, as it stands, I think Sidney Brown will be starting week 1. I don't think that's the preferred outcome here. I think that Fangio would have gone with Andrew Makuba week 1 had Makuba not gotten banged up again. The hamstring injury late in training camp. I think, again, he would have been on track to start. But the fact that he has missed some time over the course of training camp this summer, I don't think Sidney Brown had a bad summer, training camp, preseason, any of that. But I just don't think he didn't make that leap by any means to me from what we could see. And I think that's pretty disappointing for a player that the Eagles were very high on. They talked about that being a Red Star player. They get him early in that 3rd round of the 2023 draft there. Like you would want this guy to be like, at the very least, like a capable starter. And I don't know. I just don't know if I really buy that from Sidney Brown. So I'm going to go with him.
All right. Sidney Brown from BLG. Jonny, who do you have down for your biggest defensive disappointment?
Right. Commenters, give me a break with this one. This is going to be an unpopular one. So I do.
Don't you dare pick Quinyon Mitchell.
I do, yeah, Quinyon Mitchell. No, I do apologize in advance. I struggled with this one. Davis actually is a good shout. I didn't really think of Davis. I think maybe just my expectations for him aren't any different than in the past, so I don't see a different Jordan Davis. I'm going to be a bit of a weird one, really, and it's similar to my offensive one, where some might say, how can he disappoint if he's not really done anything yet? So it's not going to be popular. I'm going to go for Andrew Makuba, who's never played a snap in the NFL, but I just think some people instantly seem to expect him to just start over Sidney Brown and Marcus Epps even, and play a lot of snaps and be good instantly. And I've always had this lingering doubt because, Christ, we can go back like 10 years to Donnell Pumphrey coming out and me absolutely killing Ben Solak for that. And he will never let that go.
His boy.
His boy. And it was just like and I think Ben obviously realised in hindsight, there's always these size expectations for a reason. And Andrew Makuba is nowhere near that small. He's not that small. And I'm not saying it's going to completely end sort of his career or whatever, but he is light. Like, he's light. And I think one of the things about being light is I do think injury problems become more of a problem. I do think the way you play can become more of a problem. Can he play how he did in college at 185 or whatever pounds he is? I don't know. And I have question marks about the player. I have question marks about how hard it is to play in this scheme as a starting safety as well. Like, it takes time. It's all about communication. Sidney Brown's had a year with defenders around him. He may not be better. I know he was injured last year, but he's still trained with them. He's still been in meeting rooms. He still knows how the gene works, how Blankenships work. I know Marcus Epps is probably not going to play a lot this year. I know he's been injured and hasn't had a great career since he left the Eagles, but I still think he was a very reliable player. There was a fantastic article, I can't remember who wrote it, from recently that came out on, and apologies for not knowing who wrote about it, but they wrote about Marcus Epps and Reed Blankenship, and Blankenship talking about how cool it is that Epps is back, because Blankenship basically just said how great of a feel for the scheme Epps had, and that he was basically Blankenship's mentor. And I think he went as far as saying that they actually asked Blankenship before they signed him, like, what his opinion was about signing Marcus Epps, and he basically said immediately, like, yes, do it. So I don't, and it was Zach Berman who was talking about this. It wasn't an article, it was a tweet. So shout out Zach. But he obviously spoke to Epps. And I struggle to see that Makuba will be as, his playing time will be as heavy as people think, and he'll be as good as people think. I think some people just instantly assume he's going to take the starting position from week 1 and play basically all year. And similar to the injury problem with Dickerson, I think that could be a problem. And I think he might get beat a little bit. I think he might struggle on bigger tight ends. I think if they're going to ask him to do what Chauncey Gardner-Johnson did and rotate down in a slot occasionally and cover big receivers, big tight ends, I think he can get pushed around a little bit. So I think he's a really interesting player. I'm not convinced he's going to be a full-time starter. And I think for a second-round safety, the Eagles obviously drafted him above players that could be full-time starters, so they definitely think he will be. But I'm not sure it'll be this year. I think it might take some time. So it's harsh picking a player who's not played. But once again, I'll go back to the idea of what I think people think he might do compared to where I think he'll be this year.
All right. So lot of disappointment in the safety room, according to you guys. We'll see. Hopefully one of those guys is a breakout because the other one was disappointing, but I guess we'll see how that plays out. Let's turn the page to record prediction. And I know this is BLG's category to be first, but I think we should give this one to Jonny first because it's his favorite thing.
Yeah.
He always wants to make sure we get in the show. So, Jonny, let's go with your record prediction.
So last year, me and you both went 12-5, and the Eagles went 14-3, so we were 2 off. I'm gonna repeat, because if you get it wrong once, get it wrong twice, and go 12-5 again. I think the Eagles will probably be slightly worse than they were last year. And that doesn't mean they can't win the whole thing because they were so good. They didn't need to be. They could be 3% worse and still be the best team based on the end of last year. Just because I think the amount of players they've lost on the defensive side of the ball is hard to feel. And I think defense year by year is not as predictable as offense. And I think the offense might need to take a big step. And I'll be honest, the second thing is I think their schedule is hard. Like, I was looking at their schedule recently, and just going through the first 5 or 6 weeks, and until they get to New York in week 6, Cowboys, I know losing Parsons, but still that's a home game, so you like to think they'll be okay, but it's still a big rival game. Then Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium, the Rams at the Link, Tampa Bay away, Denver, Minnesota week 7. They've got a lot of good teams. That stretch in week 10, 11, going to Green Bay, Detroit. They get a little bit of a break then, but I think it's a difficult schedule, although I think the end part is quite nice, that week 12 to week 15 part. But I think only losing 3 games again to me would be incredibly impressive. So I would be a little bit more pessimistic, but I still think that might be enough to get the 1 seed. And I still think that might be enough, or at least get the 2 or 3 seed and still be a very, very good football team. And I also think last year we saw the defense take a little bit of time to gel. Fangio's defense is all about communication. So the whole thing's built on. And I think there's going to be new parts. And there's going to be 2 new parts, probably out of 4 or 5 in the secondary. And I think that will probably take a little bit of time to gel. So I think the other side of the coin is that the offense could find their feet and get even better because there's so much growing room for the offense, and that can negate the issues on defense they may have. But I'll go 12-5, maybe a little bit lower, but I'll go with 12-5.
All right, so 12-5 for Jonny. BLG, what do you have?
Yeah, I had them at 13-4 last year, and somehow that wasn't high enough, it was crazy. I was like, how? I felt like oh man, I feel like that's too high. 13-4. They outpaced that. This year, I'm really between 12-5 and 11-6. I think it's one of those two. I'm feeling between those two. I'll go 12-5 because that's what I have them in my prediction that I did back when the schedule came out. Obviously, new information can lead to you changing your opinion, but I don't think there's been enough to change that. And also, I generally try to stick to that. So I try to be as honest and make that my real prediction, what I really believe. Yeah, if anything, I'm skewing 1 game down, but I think 12-5. I think they still have so much talent in offense. I don't love the rest of the division, really. I think they, famous last words for a team that hasn't repeated in the NFC East since 20 years ago, over 21 years ago, 2004. So it's almost really dumb to pick the Eagles to win the division, let alone a repeat as Super Bowl champions. It's based on how it does not go that way in this division. But I like their chances in this division. And I think if you win it, you get at least 1 home playoff game. I feel good about that because I feel good about Jalen Hurts. Even if he has a rocky season, I feel like he might be able to play really well in a big game like we've seen before. Until someone stops Saquon Barkley, as I said at the top of the show, I'm not merely going to assume it happens. So I'd like to see that before I start doubting that. And I think they're in a really good spot to contend for another Super Bowl. Obviously, there's things out of their control, injury luck. Sometimes it's just another team's year and another team gets really hot and they kind of just have that energy or momentum or whatever. But barring any of that, I think they're right in the mix.
You just have to thread that needle of saying they'll go 12-5. Not win the division and then win the Super Bowl as a wild card team. So it's possible. There's a path. Can you imagine if the Eagles repeated as Super Bowl champions before repeating as division champions? That would just be hilarious. I forget the stat exactly, but I think it is you only have to go back 2 years for every other division to have had a repeat winner. I think it's 2 years. It might be 3, but I looked it up when we were doing our division previews on Chalk Talk, and I think it was every team, every division except the NFC West had a repeat winner last year, and the NFC West the year before had. So it was 2 years you had to go back, and then the NFC East is 20 years, which is crazy. But all that to say, I also wrote down 12-5 for the Eagles, so we'll make it a clean sweep at 12-5. And then we go to the final one. This is our bold prediction. This is our chance to say some outlandish things that only get clipped up if they turn out to be right. BLG, what do you have as your bold prediction?
You got to be bold, right? So I'm
Gotta
not.
be bold.
I'm going to be very bold. I'm going to say
All right.
Saquon Barkley has a better year than he did last year. I think I know there's never been a 2,000-yard rusher,
Wow.
which that in itself is bold, me just saying that. And by better, it is a little subjective. I'm not like guaranteeing he has more yards, but I just think like we could look at this and be like, wow, he was even just like more effective somehow. And I think even if he comes close to that, it is more impressive from the standpoint of teams, had a whole offseason to adjust to that and try to, solve the Saquon Barkley problem, and they still couldn't stop him. Like that would be even more impressive to me for him to be able to do that. So I know it's bold, but he looked so good to me in training camp. As I said earlier, I thought he looked better than he did. He looks extremely healthy. The offense looks extremely great when they rely on him, even in times where things look shaky otherwise. Like, again, just the easy answer for them. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Saquon Barkley has an even better year than he did last year.
BLG is going to cling to that in some way. He's going to be out there at the end of the season being like, hey, he had more than 2 receiving touchdowns this year. Yes. He was better in some way. PFF grade was better. All right. That's man, can you imagine back-to-back 2,000-yard seasons? Put him on the Madden cover twice in a row. Jonny, what do you have as your bold prediction?
I feel like that's bolder than mine. Right.
Mine too, so don't feel bad.
Right, actually, maybe it's not. I still think mine is. So despite having Barkley as offensive MVP, I still think he could have like 400 yards less and still be elite. I think the Eagles, again, my common theme, maybe it'll be a harder game. The Eagles may have to throw the ball a little bit more. I think the Eagles are going to be a bit of a stars and scrubs offense throwing the ball. I mentioned this a few times. So I will go with Devontae Smith's highest yards ever was 3 years ago, 1,196. So he's never clipped 1,200. AJ Brown has eclipsed 1,200 twice in his career. I will go with both Devontae Smith and AJ Brown have over 1,200 yards, which I imagine is quite rare for top 2 receivers, but I think the passing game will funnel through both of those two, and I think they will throw the ball a bit more. I think Hurts will have more passing yards than he did, so I think there's a good chance for both of them to put up big numbers. I guess you can make it more bold by adding a few yards to it, because AJ Brown 1,200 isn't that bold, but I think the two of them doing it, still, it would be a record for Devontae Smith. So I'll go with 1,200 yards for both of Smith and AJ Brown.
All right, so Johnny's bold prediction is that my offensive breakout pick would be correct, which, based off how my picks went last year, that would be bold.
Yeah, better change it.
Before I give my bold prediction, I want to give a fun prediction. I think the Eagles, after Jerry Jones talked about trading Micah Parsons because they need to be better against the run, it's going to be hilarious when they go rush for like 200 yards on Thursday night, and we get to talk about that fun quote and then post the box score. So that's my fun prediction. But I thought about saying something outlandish like they'll rush for 250 yards in the opener, but you never want your prediction to be tied to the opener because then it's not a season-long thing. So here's mine. I think the Eagles open the season with a win over their Cowboys as they drop the banner, and then they lose 3 of their next 4 games. They have that stretch BLG talked about at Kansas City versus Los Angeles, at Tampa Bay versus Denver before it lets up a little bit. So win the opener, drop 3 of the next 4. Everybody panics. WIP wants to know if we need to go to Tanner McKee. And then they win 9 straight games to get to 10-3, headed into a showdown with the Washington Commanders in Week 16. So kind of similar to my pick for last year a little bit, but I think they're going to win that opener, and then I think it's going to look bleak for a good portion of September as pieces settle in. But I do think they'll get it together and go on a run.
Good shout.
I do think it's. Go ahead, Jonny.
No, sorry, I was just agreeing. I think it's a good prediction.
I do think it's like I was looking back at some of my Eagles Buccaneers post-game coverage from last year when they got destroyed there. And like, it just kind of does remind you how things can really change just within the course of a season, sometimes for better and for worse. Where I was like, I don't know, Vic Fangio early on, the results here haven't been great. Not that, I thought he couldn't possibly ever be good, but it's just like, I wasn't feeling really good about him after that game in week 4. And then obviously you're feeling amazing about him by the end of the season. So sometimes you never know. It could look pretty bleak and all of a sudden turns around.
I would rather travel to Lambeau for a playoff game than host the Buccaneers at the Link. Like, I want no part of the Buccaneers ever.
Yes.
Ever. Like, just never. OU has the same thing. So OU has this thing with Kansas State where they would just always get beat by Kansas State, even when they weren't good. And I would go to a game every season with a friend of mine. We would just kind of get together, college buddy. We'd go to a game, and we made a rule for ourselves. We will never go to another K-State game. After like the second time in a row that we went to a K-State game and OU lost. And it's kind of like that with the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Just give me no part of the Buccaneers. I guess I should have made my bold prediction. I'm going to amend my bold prediction. I'll keep them both, but my bold prediction is that contrary to what Jonny said earlier, A.J. Brown is good and will have a good season.
Very nice. Yeah. He might be good on Thursday.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that about wraps up our prediction show here. We'll throw it around the horn for final thoughts for anything you guys didn't get to mention. You couldn't fit it into one of these categories. But before we do that, BLG, thanks so much for joining us. It's always great to have you on the show. Little disappointed that you got post-game worked out somewhere because I was ready to get you on here. But I guess we'll share with Shield. We're supposed to share. But anyways, be sure you're following BLG on Twitter, Brandon Gowton. Check out the written work and Jonny's written work at bleedinggreennation.com. But BLG, any final thoughts, any final predictions, anything you want to plug? The floor is yours.
Yeah, maybe it's because I'm a bit of a contrarian, but there's been a lot of talk about how, and we probably even mentioned it here, the Eagles are going to pass the ball more than they did last year. That makes sense, right? Conventional wisdom is that you were so extremely run heavy last year. The fact that also Jeffrey Lurie has like basically outwardly said at times, like, we want to be a pass first franchise, and their actions show that over the course of time. And I get it. Like, I get why you would think that. I think the receivers want to be more involved production wise. All of that, yes, true. But at the same time, they were just so good with their formula last year. It doesn't mean they'll be able to do it again. But if things kind of do get into a rough spot, like they kind of did last year when they tried to be more pass heavy early in the season, it's going to be very tempting for them to go back to that formula that was working for them and no one could stop. So I guess I kind of feel like this Eagles 2025 offense might be a little bit closer to the 2024 offense than a lot of people would both like it to be and also what they're expecting it to be. And I've kind of been thinking about that a lot, even again, just seeing what I saw in training camp at times with the passing game, a lot of sync at times, and it just felt like everything got better again once they just gave the ball to Saquon Barkley and didn't overthink it. So I definitely think I'm not as with everyone in terms of thinking it's going to be this massive swing back to the passing game.
Yeah, the Eagles are going to make everybody go back to like 250-pound linebackers. It's going to be great. All right. Jonny, any final thoughts? Anything you want to fire off before we get out of here?
No, not really. Just anytime BLG. I always love these shows. These are great shows, actually. We should have more seasons, then we could predict more. But I will say, I think there's a lot of talk about running the football, and I agree with BLG about Saquon. I had him as offensive MVP as well. Just remind the people that Jalen Hurts' rushing is a massive part of the running game. And even though he may not have as many carries, he is a big reason why the whole thing works. I was listening to Cody Alexander on with Eagles Eric with a really, really good show a couple of weeks ago on the network. And when Eric said, like, sort of, what's the one thing that defensive coordinators hate? It's running QBs, mobile QBs, QB counter bash, gap scheme with mobile QBs. That stuff is tough to prepare for. And I think the really interesting thing this year is how much they're going to try and hold Hurts back. Because I think we saw in the playoffs, they were more willing to rush him. Because I get it. They don't want the franchise quarterback taking hits every week. But this offense, as BLG is right, it's at its best when they're running the ball. And it's at its best when Hurts is running the ball a lot as well. So it'll be interesting in those crunch games in the first 6 weeks of the season whether we see a bit of old school Hurts and we have quite a lot of carries because teams might try and shut down Barkley a lot more. But If the Eagles are committed to the run, and you know my thoughts on the running game, I've had them for years and years. It's an identity. It's about committing to it. It doesn't mean it's going to work all the time, but you essentially beat down opponents by consistently doing it. I think we might see Hurts have a sneaky good rushing season as well, if the Eagles really do commit to the run this year.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. BLG back on the Pinpool Network. Always good to have you on, BLG. We'll have to set this up again, but thank you for joining us, and thank you everybody that is watching live or listening back later. We certainly appreciate all of your support as we get ready to jump into another Eagles season. Just a reminder, we will have post-game live directly after the opener on Thursday night. We'll also have a quick halftime show that you can catch on YouTube or Twitter. So make sure you check those out. Click that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any of our other shows, and we'll catch you guys next time.